Today we're going to go a little bit further than what you typically see when we talk about social media and we talk about different folks. When we look at how to reach and communicate and message with people, we're going to be talking about the psychographics of social media. But because I've only got 50 minutes and we can only kind of go on the surface, I can't go really deep. So let me start by saying there are about a dozen of you in here that will be highly offended by this presentation. If you are, please feel free to tweet it or email me and let me know why. Wade, please help me on the technology side. This will be fun if we have to do it without the presentation. By show of hands, we're going to do some self-identification. Anyone here over 66 and want to admit it? Okay, how many here self-identify as baby boomers? Oh boy, you guys are going to be really offended. You might be my dozen. Okay. How many of you are Gen X? And how many of you sweet young ones are millennials? How many millennials do we have in the room? Yeah, okay. All right, good show of hands. We currently have, excellent. All right, hit the first one. This is a little different. The clicker isn't working, so I don't have control of my presentation, and I'm feeling a little bit off here. Let's talk about what is a generation. It seems kind of basic to start here, but so few people can define it. Anyone have a good definition they want to share? Now, all right, we won't do the Socratic method then. We'll just go with it. Let's go ahead and forward that. It really has three elements. It's about 20 years. All right, they share a common time and location in history. This is, okay, and they have shared beliefs and behaviors, and we're highly predictable. This is the one part of it where people get kind of a little bit uncomfortable because we like to all think we're special and unique. Millennials is special. Millennials especially like to think that they're special and unique, but we're highly predictable based on our generational affiliation, and it's something we really don't think about. In fact, when most marketers look at it, they say, okay, I'm going to try to reach moms who are between 30 and 44 and who live in a specific geographic region, and they go by the demographics and they never go deeper than that. And what's so interesting about the psychographics from a generational perspective is that this affects, sorry, go ahead. Here's why it matters, and here's why it takes us a little bit further. I don't know what my signal is going to be to you. We'll go there. It affects nearly everything, and it affects us within our families. It affects us within our communities. But here's why. It affects the messages that resonate with you, the motivations that you have for what you do. It affects how you recruit people and retain them. It affects team dynamics. How many of you have had like a challenging boss or a challenging coworker, employee? Oh my gosh, I'm surprised not every hand went up. So they must all work for Stacy then. They all work for you. Okay, go ahead and advance to the next one. But it affects nearly everything, and we so rarely think of it. You know, we see the headlines, baby boomers are heading towards retirement and they're not financially prepared. And we see, millennials are taking over everything, and aren't these kids great? And we see that, but we really don't stop to think and understand it. So you'll find differences. Hold on one second. You'll find differences, and this is the fascinating thing. Can you go back just one quick for me? You'll find differences even within the same doctrine. So like within the same faith community, you'll find differences even within your own family, which is a really unusual thing to say because you all have the common familial experience, but suddenly you're going to understand your aunts and your grandparents a lot better than you did before. Before we go into defining the generations and going deeper into that, let me just show you a little bit here, and I guess I can't back away. Okay. So this is actually from Pew's research, and what we've got here is you've got millennials, Gen X, young and older boomers, the silent generation, GI generation, which are called civics, okay, they're grouped together. And the number one thing we're all doing online right now is search. So how many of you are in SEO as a job? Okay, you've got a job for a while, okay. But what I want to show you is for millennials, social networking sites is the third most common activity that they're doing. And then you can see it drops down for Gen X. All right, and that's because we're working and we're busy, just so you know. That's why it drops down. And then, so these are all 90%, and you've got your 80s and 70%. And if you look at this, you look at young boomers and older boomers, it almost goes to the very bottom of the 50th percentile, and then civics, it goes down even further. So when you talk about, we're going to run a social media campaign, and it's going to be great, but you're trying to reach boomers, you're already at a loss because they're doing a whole bunch of other stuff with their online activity. Okay, this is a special relationship we're going to have, Mark, here. And just so you know, I want to give you the demographics of internet users, and new research came out, the millennials who are 12 to 17, 98% of them are online. So we go from 98 to 95, 87%, 78, and then 42, kind of going down the generations there. I don't know what the signal is going to be. We're going to have to work that out. Okay, let's start with civics. These are folks born, so I just go like this. These are folks born prior to 1945. So there's currently, if I've done my math right, those of you that were math majors, feel free to check me there, but they're 66 and older. So these are folks like my dad. Okay, my dad was born in 1940. For some of you, that's your grandparents. For some of you, it's within the parents there. And just so you know, you will find different definitions of when generations start and end. I go by both Pew and the U.S. Census data. I just kind of go with those. But, oh, no, go back. This generation is called Masters of the American Dream. And they really are the last generation to have achieved what we consider, from a cultural perspective, the American dream. So they're both traditional and they respect tradition. So let's talk about that. This is the last generation where you met someone, you married someone, and then you had children, right? I mean, it seems so odd now when we talk about our culture. There's plenty of people having children out of wedlock. But these were kids who, when they came of age, okay, so they are going to come of age kind of in the post-World War II, production. Sorry, I lost my train of thought without my slide there. They're going to come of age there in World War II into post-production, into what we call prosperous America. But you married your high school sweetheart. You were going to go work at the same company probably for 34 years. You're going to work your way up, right? The concept of having a career, of changing jobs, almost an anomaly for that generation. So it was, and imagine this, Sundays you didn't go shopping, Sundays weren't spent on the internet or watching TV. You put on your Sunday best, you went to services, and then you usually had a family meal. But that wasn't your only family meal of the week, right? Because what do we know about that tradition? Mom was at home, right? So they're home-cooked meals pretty much most nights of the week. From a viewpoint of this is the generation that really understands call to duty. In fact, in World War II, believe it or not, there were people who lied about their age to join the Army or to join the military service. You think anybody's lying right now? Yeah, I don't think so. Coming from a military family, I can tell you no one's probably lying for that. But this is a generation that they were called to duty. So victory gardens, right? War bonds, volunteering, into a volunteer, military services. They understood something bigger than themselves. So for this generation, they really are the original community managers, community builders, Kiwanis, Rotary clubs, all those types of things that are going to build and create community and connection broader than the family unit. This generation really made it possible. Okay, this is what they were about. This is a highly social generation. We tend to forget that now because they almost become a marketing ploy, to senior citizens, and they almost become a joke kind of in our youth-based culture. But this is the generation that was highly social, called to something bigger than themselves, and for them, legacy is their biggest motivator. What's their legacy? What are they leaving behind? What's bigger than me? What can I contribute to? These are also folks who, if we had to have a saying for them, save for a rainy day. How many of you think boomers have that as a value? Yeah, now, credit cards, checking accounts, This is a cash-based, okay? For the most part, these are, if you didn't have the money, you saved. They had layaway back in 1940s and 1950s. So that concept was there, but if you didn't have it, you didn't buy it, all right? There was no such thing as going into debt for something. So this is, believe it or not, they actually have a lot of wealth that they have, but the unfortunate part is that because of how we are right now from a youth base, what do we do with folks when our parents get too old? We move them into a assisted living community. And we've broken apart. We take people out of their home that have been in it for 40 years, and we take them away from the community they've built, and we put them in assisted living, or we put them in different spaces, or we move them in with our family. And suddenly they're broken away from their social, their peer-to-peer connection. And we wonder why we see the highest rates of depression in senior citizens right now. We've taken a completely social generation and kind of institutionalized them. or at least that's the way it's looking. But this is from the perspective of they're the masters of the American dream. Get married, have kids, dad worked outside the home, had a car, made money, earned your way. You were going to probably retire from that same company and work your way up. The master of the American dream. It's all we're all aspiring to. But we have 3 generations since, and none of us will probably go back to achieving something like that. We're going to do this for each generation here, but they're a very practical generation. That makes sense, right? Because during World War II, things were scarce, right? So they're a very practical generation. If I can't afford it, I don't buy it. If it needs to be contributed and grown, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Their work ethic, they're very dedicated. So from an employee or from a volunteer perspective, if you've got them in their organization, they're there to contribute. Okay? They're not just there to collect a paycheck. They're very respectful of authority. We're going to see how this shifts and changes, by the way, through the generations. And they lead by hierarchy. So the boss man was the boss man, and what the boss man said, I did. Not so today, especially Gen Xers. All right. Their relationships were about personal sacrifice. So when we look at the marriage statistics, the divorce rate for a long time in this country went like this. And then with boomers, we kind of, skied up. And why? Because you never heard a civic say, I'm just not satisfied in my marriage, right? It was about personal sacrifice. Well, some days I love them, some days I choose to love them, right? But they're gonna stay married. It's about personal sacrifice. Their biggest turnoff is vulgarity. So if you've got Lady Gaga and you're trying to sell to, sell to seniors, it's probably not the best choice. But the biggest thing for them is stability. And why is that? Their parents came out of the Great Depression. All right, so they experienced scarcity. Same thing going into World War II. And our childhood or our young years are our most formative time from a generational perspective. And so, provide a stable environment. But think about that if you take someone out of the only environment that they've known their whole lives or their whole adult lives, and you move them from that. That's one of the challenges with online communities, is they don't feel as stable. It's not a matter of access to the internet or comfort with computers. It's that they'd rather sit and talk to you or get a letter from you than type with you on an IM chat. Okay? But we do know that they're using Skype at an incredibly great rate. Anyone want to guess why?
Free.
It's free. Okay, very good. Hadn't thought of that. The grandchildren, all right? They get to visually connect with the grandchildren. Also, interestingly enough, this research just came out on Monday, but they're actually the folks that are most likely to click on an online video ad. Again, they're a very visual generation, so textual, looking at something from a text, that's a book or a newspaper. All right, so that's why things like Twitter don't really resonate that well with this age group. So, go ahead, The best way to communicate and reach them, though, is always going to be a personal letter. And just so you know, this is the other thing with social media that's a turn-off for civics. They firmly believe in respect. So when I address you, let's say I say Jamie, if you were a civic, they'd want to be addressed as Mr. Sanford, right, to start. But once they got to know you, then then it's okay. So how many of you work in nonprofit? Okay, think about this when you do your direct appeal letters. And if you're going to an audience that's 66 and older, and you're sending it as Dear Joe, you've automatically turned them off unless you have a relationship. Show the respect and call them, Mr. Robinson before you switch over to your name. You'll see a dramatic difference in the amount of funding that you can get. All right, boomers. How many in here were boomers? Okay, this is where it gets a little controversial. Okay, all right. Boomers, born between 1946 and 1964, so if I've done the math right, that means you're between the ages of 47. And you took it away for me too fast there. And 64. I know it's not a math major, so. All right, we can go to the next one. And if we really want to, the civics were the masters of the American dream. Boomers, you could call the rebels with every cause, all right? Or we could call them the rule breakers who now love rules. All right, we'll go into that.